Go.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming. This is the 2023 astrological forecast, and we're just going to take a look at the energetic signatures for this year. All right. Oops. There we go. And you can still see that okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. All right, so we're just going to go quickly through an introduction, and I have my notes here, so I may be referring to them. So if I'm looking off to the side, that's what's going on. And I also just wanted to really quickly make sure that if anybody's having problems, that I've got my email open so I can check that. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is astrology for those of you that are new to this or may not know what astrology is exactly. We're going to look to culture for clues about what's happening ahead. We're going to look at both color and numerology. We're going to talk a little bit again this year about the Pluto return, which is just finishing, but its influence is still with us. And then we're going to look at the year ahead. Now, when we look at the year ahead, when we're looking at the transits, it's actually more of a global influence. It is not necessarily yours personally. In order to look at yours personally, I would need, your birth chart and then look at how this is impacting you on a very personal level. But this is more of a big picture. We're going to start global, and then we're going to work down to some of the smaller, the closer in planets, or what we call personal planets, that will give us more of a probably more of an influence that happens closer to our hearts. Okay. Just to let you guys know, I know most of you have some sense of who I am, but I moved here to Saddlebrook in Tucson in July of 2019. I have a degree in interior architectural design. Then I decided I wanted to be a teacher and taught middle school for 15 years, which I loved, loved, loved. I've been an astrologer, kind of straddling both of those time periods for about 25 years. And I belong to the Organization for Professional Astrologers, as well as the Tucson Astrologers Guild. And I practice both evolutionary and traditional astrology. I love to write, and also, as being a teacher, I love giving presentations and talks and so on. So we're going to talk just really briefly about what is astrology. And astrology is the cycle, the study of the knowledge of cycles. So if we think about the planetary cycles, we are, as an astrologer, we look at the planetary cycles from an Earth-based point of view in both traditional and evolutionary astrology. And so when I talk about a cycle, we know that the moon takes a month before it's back to the same place for us, right? So we go from new moon to full moon. And then the sun, of course, takes 1 year. So when we talk about, we wish people happy birthday, that is actually a solar cycle. So each of the planets have cycles, and of course, the furthest planet out is Pluto, and Pluto has a 246-year cycle. So they all have varying impacts on us. So the one thing I really wanted to talk about is that's kind of underlays everything that we're talking about tonight is that when we're born, when you take that first breath, is that you were born with this potential, right? The planets and the sun and the stars were all in a particular place at the moment we were born. And that, in astrology, we call that a birth chart, right? It's a snapshot of the heavens at the moment you took your first breath. And that gives us a tremendous amount of information. It's almost, I think of it as a life map. It's really the potential that you have throughout life. Now, often people will say, well, if the planets predict things, and I don't think they necessarily do, they tell the story of our potential and not the specifics. So often people will say, well, if things are fated, then I don't, I'm not exercising free will. And in reality, in my particular view, I think it's about 20% fate and about 80% free will. I used this example the other night. There's an astrologer by the name of Liz Green. And years ago, I was reading one of the first astrology books that I read, where she was looking back at historical time periods. And the difference was that there was Martin Luther King and, oh gosh, Hitler, that they actually had similar signatures in their chart, but in terms of men, they actually rose to different life choices in terms of how they manifested, the life that they lived. So we can see that they were very different, but their charts were very similar. So, and also with the planetary influences, we have both a positive influence and then we have a negative. So as a soul, we can actually choose, and sometimes this is a moving, I can't think of the name of it, but it's basically where we can choose how to react or not with this particular placements. So sometimes we'll have good behavior and we'll act in a very positive way, and sometimes we won't. So that's what you'll see when I talk about some of these things are both positive and the negative influences. So we're going to notice the cultural elements first. So in order to look at where we are going with 2023, we need to look at where we've been. So I'm going to start with cultural elements first. And for those of you that were at the talk last year, this was certainly I really love this image because I think all of us can really remember what it was like going into 2022. We were really afraid to sort of open that door and walk through because we weren't sure what 2022 was going to be about. We still had a lot of trepidation. And then, of course, 2023, we move into this year with a lot of baggage, as you can see here. And this ever looming, they keep talking about it in the news, recession, not a recession. Everything's become so unaffordable, inflation, interest rate hikes, and so on. And then the next one I want to look at is color. Again, with my background in interior architecture, is that I've always been really influenced by color and took classes in color psychology. And I find this really fascinating. If we look at 2020, the Pantone color of the year was classic blue, which blue, of course, is all about security, right? But it also corresponds to the throat chakra. And of course, they're picking these colors back late in 2019. So I would imagine that probably by September, no later than October, maybe even earlier, that the people who do the forecasting knew what colors they were going to choose. And then we look at 2021 and we have this dual color of the yellow and the gray. And of course, when we think of yellow, it's all about happiness and stimulation, confidence and determination. And then gray, of course, is control and stability, but it also is about insecurity and loss. So we can see that this is really, if you think about 2021, that's exactly where we were. Everything was, an underlying modality of, just insecurity, but yet we were hoping and praying for a lot of good things to happen. And of course, this relates to the solar plexus chakra. And then, of course, the very peri, which was 2022. And this brought us more into this sensitivity place. Okay. And then this is this year's color, Viva Magenta, which I think is really cool. And I find it really fascinating when I was reading what Pantone says. This is just a screenshot off their website. And then I pulled out some of the keywords: boldness and fun, and confidence and humanity. And I really want to focus on humanity because that's a big theme that as we're moving into some of the Aquarius, some of the planets are moving into Aquarius, that this is a big theme for Aquarians and that will carry us through the next 20 years. Now we're going to just look briefly at numerology. So, oops, hang on. Let me see if I can. Oops. Hang on, let me see if I can mute us all.
And I put the oil in the center, and it stays for
Can you guys mute yourselves? Sorry about that.
I don't know where to mute.
I should have done that before we started. Hang on just for a second.
Wait, no, I grew.
overall, things taste much better.
Sure.
All right, so we're going to continue with numerology. And we know that 2023 is a 7-year. And what I find really interesting about this is just what they say about it, that 7 is introspective. It's about emotion and analysis, intuition. And to me, that sounds a lot like Pisces. And when we think about 7 in metaphysics, it's actually a prime number. The 3, if you break 7, it's a 3 and a 4. 3 is spiritual and 4 is physical. And with astrology, there are actually 7 planets, and there are 4 elements and 3 modalities. And also it's the cross of matter coming into spirit that is, truly that as above, so below. That is what this is about, is that we are spirits incarnated into a material world. So if we can just think about some of the things that encompass 7s, because 7 is, there are 7 colors of a rainbow, there are 7 continents, 7 seas, 7 sages, there are 7 sisters in the Pleiades. The atomic number for nitrogen is actually 7. So there's a lot of basic things that have this very classic number associated with it, with metaphysics. And this is very interesting. So this came from another astrologer. I actually, follow the moons, but I don't really necessarily focus on, tracking each moon's degree, which is actually its address, if you think of it that way. But I was actually really surprised that there are, out of the last several full moons and then the next few coming up, they all reduce to a number 7. So if we look at 16 degrees, it's 1 plus 6, of course, is a 7. So this is kind of interesting. And of course, there were 3 in 2022, and there are 4 in 2023. And then if we looked at 7, it's 16 degrees, and we look at the Tarot card, of course, the Tarot is number 16 is the Tower. And I think this very much looks like the state of where we're at right now. There's a lot of things. I think I made this joke the other night, was like, this reminds me of our government. Things are kind of falling apart. And I love this quote. It says, if you pull a thread here, and you'll find it's attached to the rest of the world. And again, that's very much a Piscean theme, that we are all connected, that there's this collective unconscious, and that we really are a part of many things. We are not separate as we so believe we are. So I want to talk really briefly about the US Pluto return. If you were here at my talk last year, I did address this, and 2022 is really where Pluto kind of finished up its work. I shouldn't say that, actually finished up its exactitude in terms of its connection point, but it still has an influence, but it is moving away. And of course, that will take some time. So we can look at what happened when we talk about a Pluto return. What we're talking about is the chart for the United States. So if we look at our country, which is a huge influence on our personal lives, it's been about 246 years since we started our country. So what else was happening in the 1770s? Because if you look back at this time period, what's happening right now is this becomes an echo. So the themes for Pluto involve transformation. So it's a death and a rebirth, because this is a signal to transform what no longer works. So if you think about the 1770s, we were a colony of Great Britain, and we were really upset with what was happening. King George was implementing a lot of rules and regulations, and we had no voice in the government. And it was a great time of oppression. So the founders of our country decided that we wanted to break free and signed the Declaration of Independence in 1776. And the issues that we were struggling with as an emerging nation was these were the values and beliefs that we really wanted. We wanted equality. We wanted rights, individual rights, because it was something we weren't getting. We wanted the freedom and the liberty and the opportunity to create a life that we want for ourselves. And then, of course, very importantly, democracy, a voice within the power of the government. So these were our values. And if you know what an ideal is, it is something that we strive for, whether it's in our personal lives or whether the American ideals, the American ideals actually are part of the Declaration of Independence. So that's where these terms come from, is this was really first and foremost for the founding fathers, that this is what we wanted for our new nation. So, and because I used to teach history, it's something I'm very familiar with in terms of looking at the very pivotal times in our country, in terms of when we actually got really close to reaching these ideals, and then we might have made strides backwards. So I often think about this as kind of like the high tide mark on the shore, is that we know that the incoming tide is approaching and it's getting closer and closer and closer, but then it can recede. So it's, in a way, it's almost like a breath too. There's an intake of breath, and then there's an exhale, that nothing actually remains the same, but it's actually this, again, this striving towards something, but it's really hard to hold and it's really hard to keep, right? It's forever evolving. So when we think about what has been left unresolved, and I would say all of them right now, it feels like they're all very first and foremost. And we have different time periods throughout history where there's great strides that are made, and they do correlate to the sections of astrology, or what we call, like whether it's a conjunction or opposition or a square, right? These things kind of come back around for us to revisit. And those are definitely in the timing of the transits. So certainly we look at like the Civil Rights Act of the 1960s about equality and rights. And then today we're seeing like Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement for women and rights. And then of course, a new group that's emerging really strongly in terms of looking for equal rights is the LGBTQ plus group. So these issues keep coming around, and we keep having to make adjustments to try and meet these ideals. And this is part of the Pluto work, right? It's ripping down what has been to make room for what needs to happen, because we've outgrown it. That's kind of the reason I had this little image of the chick and the egg, is it's about outgrowing things, and something new needs to be born. So in the United States chart, we have Pluto is in Capricorn in the second house. So it's coming back around to that same place today. And if we look at the symbology of this, Capricorn is the sign of business, corporations, and institutional structures, as well as authority figures. And the second house rules our economy, values, and our resources. So if you put those together, you can see that these are the areas for our country that is impacting us, that is being asked to transform. And it's Pluto, when Pluto transits occur, it's never very pretty. It's definitely something that when it comes up, if you have not done the work to kind of let things go, it definitely has this, revolutionary kind of destructive type energy. So where we're at with the Pluto transits that are happening for our country is that often, and this is really true, I think this is just human nature, is that things have to escalate before we're forced to let go of what's existing and create something new. So if we look at this, like what is outdated, right? The polarization in government, the gridlock. What's also outdated is money and power over people. And this winners and losers mentality that we're seeing within our capitalistic system, which is not a bad system, but what it's done, and I was actually looking at, I did a lot of research for this talk, and I'm not necessarily bringing everything up, but when I looked at when we went away from the gold standard in 1971, and if you look at the graphs of, where corporate gains have just skyrocketed, whereas the cost of living and what people are paid have been keeping pace, if not even dipping. Like how far your money goes today is quite a bit less than what people had in the 70s. So, and just personally, I can think about it. My father was a lineman for the phone company, and my mom didn't work. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this. And we had a family of 5. Now, granted, we weren't very wealthy, and I'm sure things were tight. If I were to ask my mom, she would tell me about how tight things were. But, they were homeowners and, one car, but, they were able to make things work. And it's just, things are just not the same today. So that's kind of what has been happening over the last several years. But we're going to look a little bit more, and it just finished up at the end of December, the last final pass. And of course, Pluto moves really, really slow. So we're still going to be seeing this influence of our government and maybe even education sectors. Anything that's institutional within our country is having a moment where it's having to remake itself to fit what society is really about today. Because the things that were created back then aren't necessarily working. And if they haven't been revised, it's time to kind of just remake things so that they fit. So 2023 is a transition year. This has been referred to as an in-between year. We had the chaos from 2020 up through 2022. And we're getting ready to start new beginnings, but that really is looking like it's going to be more like 2024, 2025. So we're definitely in this transition year. We've had huge radical shifts in terms of how we live, how we work, how we communicate. Every time I think about how we communicate, just social media and Twitter, and it's amazing how things have just radically changed. So again, just to reiterate, I'll just go through this really quickly. We have Pluto in Capricorn began in 2008. Now, it wasn't exact on our chart at this time, but this is when the influence started, and it is moving out of Capricorn this year. Pluto is. So Pluto is about power, destruction, transformation, death and rebirth. Can be also coercion or collective shadow. Many other terms that can go with this, but this is just a few. And Capricorn, again, represents structures, organizations, government, authority figures, oh, this is a new one, tradition and old ways and duty. So we just talked about this, what organizational systems are currently undergoing transformation, and there's quite a few. Didn't really talk about education, but we can see, you know, having to shift kids very quickly to online, you know, schools and staying at home has really caused a lot of shift with education, and we'll see what actually shakes out now that most kids are back to normal brick and mortar school, unless they choose to do otherwise. So it'll be interesting to see what that happens with that. All right, so we're shifting from Capricorn into Aquarius. So again, we're going from this control and hierarchy, the old way. Again, Capricorn is this impersonal determination to achieve. And we're moving into the next 21-year cycle of Pluto in Aquarius. And it'll be really interesting now that you can hold this in your mind, is to just watch how things change. Watch the language that people use. Now, that doesn't mean that in 2023 that we were all over here in Capricorn, and then now we're going to be all over here. Is in like anything else, transitions happen slowly. We're already starting to see some of these things in terms of being more humanitarian, more egalitarian, sort of the new way of doing things. So it will take a while for this shift to actually take hold. I don't know if it'll take hold everywhere, but we'll certainly see it moving in this direction. So where will we see it? We can certainly look to, you know, like, what will our democracy look like? There's already a lot of buzz about things that are kind of falling apart with this, and a lot of people that are a little afraid about what's going to happen with our democracy. But again, if all of us are metaphysical in this group here, and if we can just remember that we are part of the equation of creating this. Our economy, what's going to happen with money? You know, there's a lot of buzz out there about, I would say digital currency, but it's, you know, we're actually gone pretty digital in our country, and in a lot of places around the world that, I mean, I don't even know if I have cash in my wallet personally, between credit cards and debit cards and Venmo and PayPal and all these different ways of paying for things. We're already digital, but whether Bitcoin or something like Bitcoin, where that's going to go, that will be interesting to watch. And then, of course, I talked about this before, digital education, I think is going to be emerging even more. But these are revolutionary times. We have Pluto enters Aquarius, Uranus right now is in Taurus, and Neptune is in Pisces. So this year, Pluto is moving into Aquarius. And again, Pluto is a 246-year cycle, but as it's traveling through Aquarius, it's about 21 years. The last time it happened was in 1778, lasted through 1797. Again, this was post-Revolutionary War times in the United States. And the next time it will happen is 2269. So this is all about radical transformation. And again, we're going to look back. What was happening in 1778 and 1797, the last time Pluto was in Aquarius. And again, on the heels of a revolution, beginning a new country, we ratified the US Constitution in 1778. We established an army and a navy. As a new country, we had to worry about how we were going to take care of ourselves. The Bill of Rights was signed. They almost didn't ratify the Constitution. Not all states voted for it because they said, hey, wait a minute, the Constitution is all about the rights of the government. But where's our personal rights? Because that's what was wrong with King George, right? So where's our personal rights? And it took a while later, 10 years or so, before the Bill of Rights was signed. They had to draft it. I mean, things were moving really quickly. And at the same time, we had the French Revolution happening overseas. There was also a Haitian Revolution about this time. US copyright law was established. We had our first factories emerging in the United States. We started the Bank of the United States, and the US Stock Exchange was established. Now, this to me is very Aquarian. Like previously to the stock exchange, if you had a business, you had one partnership, either a sole proprietor or a company starting, their business and having all the profits. But now you have a way of having small individuals decide to invest in that and then also be a partner in some of those profits. So this is very Aquarian, kind of this idea of also like everyday people having a share in a company, hopefully for the gains, not just the losses. So that's kind of cool to look at those. And if we look at now, like what is happening now? This is, okay, as an Aquarian, I get really excited about these things. So with Pluto moving into Aquarius, Aquarius rules technology. It also sorry, let me get a drink of water. It actually also rules like space travel, which we're already seeing right now, right? With all these satellites in space. But Aquarius is also, not only does it represent genius and revolutionary ideas, think of that, that glyph for Aquarius right here. This is kind of like the electricity, right? It's the water that's got movement in it. But it is about revolutionary insights, things that are coming down from the heavens, kind of almost out of nowhere. It's brilliance. But Aquarius is also a very humanitarian sign. It is very much about the people, not individuals, but about groups of people. So it's very group oriented. So in March, Pluto is moving into Aquarius, and we're probably already feeling some of this. It will spend 21 years. And this is actually the title of an article called "What Are the Future Disruptive Trends in a Volatile 2023" out of Forbes magazine. And this is really cool. So some of the things that are happening right now, and I'm not sure, how familiar some of you are with this at all or not, but generative AI, which is where artificial intelligence can learn, synthesize, and produce content, is set to take off. Now, I actually got an email since I gave this talk the other day. Somebody had shared an AI produced, I don't know if it was an article or it was a business promotional thing. And they just grabbed keywords off of like the websites, and it was kind of nonsensical. I mean, it put nouns in the nouns place and it had verbs and adjectives, like they were complete sentences, but the content made no sense. So even though, because I don't know how many of you have seen, raise your hands if you've seen on social media or in other sources where they will have AI write articles for you. Has anybody seen that? Yeah. So I'm starting to see that. And obviously it's in its infancy, but I can guarantee in a short amount of time, it will probably be pretty good. As a writer, makes me a little sad, but we'll see what happens with that. So it could be from self-driving cars is also part of this AI, as well as machines that understand and process human speech. So for me, this is when I think about the first time I had to call a helpline and I was expecting to get a human being and had to start pressing numbers about what language I spoke and to get to this department or that department. I know all of us can relate to how frustrating that was, but now it's so commonplace. Like we really are surprised when we phone into a company for support and we actually get a human being like that. That's a really rare situation anymore. It takes a while before we can, get past all the prompts to get to somebody that we want to talk to, if we can get to somebody. So machines understanding and processing human speech is just getting better and better. The next one I want to talk about is quantum computing, which is very cool. This is, now I don't understand this. I'm just reading a little bit off of what I got from the article. Hold on a second. that quantum computers are expected to achieve a 60-second coherence time by 2025. So right now, the coherence time is 30 minutes. So it's dropping from 30 minutes down to 1 minute. So the computers use subatomic particles as a way of processing and storing information. And they say this technological leap brings us computers that are able to operate 1 trillion times more quickly than the fastest computers today. So it's kind of crazy, like the technology, we know like every so many years it doubles, and it's just exponentially going to explode even more with Pluto and Aquarius. Satellite connectivity. How many of you have, gone outside and looked at Starlink, or at least seen it out there? Yeah, it's kind of cool. The Starlink satellite broadband will be global, they're anticipating, by 2025. And I know that I was talking with my son the other night, and he was saying that it's actually like they are using it. I guess you can get onto it a little bit here and there. But for me, what makes this so exciting, I mean, I'm not happy about having, possibly all these satellites in the sky, as many as they're predicting. What that's going to do to being able to see the stars clearly. But what is very cool about it is that this will make it accessible anywhere in the globe. So whether you're in sub-Saharan Africa, or if you are up in the Himalayas, or if you're in the Arctic or the Antarctic on top of a mountain, or in the flatlands, you don't have to worry about fiber optic cables or cellular range, right? Now it's going to be all satellite, so it will be accessible for everyone. So that is very Aquarian. It's bringing it down to the humanity, which I think is very cool. Some more technology advances going along with the 5G, of course, which has been around a little while, but it's out there and it's definitely increasing. But then also green energy, hydrogen and fusion, they say are the biggest energy trends in the green energy. And they say green hydrogen actually is a clean burning energy source that has close to 0 greenhouse emissions. So again, this will be very interesting to see where this goes. And of course, this massive data and visualization tools. I know that my only experience with this is my daughter works for a company that they actually take a tremendous amount of global health data. And they've been doing this for years, but in terms of how they do it, or how accessible it is they put all of the data into visuals. So whether it's maps or graphs and so on. And one of the things that I was looking at, now this has been years ago, was they had like the health data for Americans by county. So it was smokers versus non-smokers. You could go into, rates of obesity and diabetes, and they had it all like literally by county. So you could zoom into a state, get the state data. You could go in and get it, more regional. So it's very interesting in terms of what is out there. And of course, there's so much data, but how can you coalesce it to a point where people can utilize it? So, and then of course, robotics. Robotics is just exploding. They have humanoid robotics right now in Japan. They're the leader in producing these things, but we already know that industrial robots have been out there in manufacturing for a long time. But one of the cool things is that they're actually producing right now insect robots, and these insect robots have cameras and can go into areas that are not either healthy or too small for humans to get into, so they can go into some hazardous areas. So there's some very cool things that are happening. Now, I talked a little bit about augmented reality, and I think I'm going to skip this. Let me check my time. I'm going to go ahead and skip this, but this was a video that I was going to show and it's Google Maps, and it's not out yet. I was looking at it earlier today, but actually I wanted to show it. It's only a minute. All right.
So far,
So I'm going to
though,
skip
LiveView
ahead.
has been focused on
Can you guys hear that? Okay. So I'm going to skip ahead just a little
also
bit.
use it to explore the world around you. You'll be able to access LiveView right from the map and instantly see details about the shops and the restaurants around you, including how busy they are, recent reviews, and photos of those popular dishes. This is possible because we match what your camera sees, with millions of businesses sharing rich information on Google Maps. In addition, there are a host of new features coming to LiveView later this year. First, we're adding prominent virtual street signs to help you navigate those complex intersections. Second, we'll point you towards key landmarks and places that are important for you, like the direction of your hotel. Third, we're bringing it indoors to help you get around some of the hardest to navigate buildings, like airports, transit stations, and malls. Indoor LiveView will start rolling out in top train stations and airports in Zurich this week, and will come to Tokyo next month.
All right. Now I have to find my way back. Hang on. Gotta move some of these screens. There we go. So augmented reality, I was trying to find a better example than I had at the talk the other night, but I think that's really cool. As somebody who travels, and especially if you're walking through a city that's unfamiliar or that you don't speak the language, just being able to navigate even further. But that's what augmented reality is. It's the reality, but then it has an overlay of information that kind of helps you navigate it. So that's been out there, and of course it's expanding. Now, the next one, the next trend, this one is Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018, and it has a couple of more years. And this, if we were to coalesce it into just keywords, this could be unexpected changes to Earth. And whenever Uranus is in Taurus, we do see a lot more, well, if you can look at the picture here, possibly droughts or floods or fires and so on. So that's just one of the things. So with Uranus and Taurus, the last time it was in there was 1934 to 1942. And if we look back at the United States, we can see this was about the time period we had the Dust Bowl. There was also the locust plague of 1931. And we can see here where, again, Uranus is about disruption and Taurus is Earth, just very, very simply. At the same time, what was happening in the world was, of course, the rise of Hitler, and then, of course, the beginning of World War II. And through that time period, the things that I connect with in terms of this, things that were happening in terms of the earth and food and so on, is that this was the time period when people were rationing food and, of course, food scarcity. Now, this was, of course, in war-torn countries. And, of course, if you recall anything about this time period, there was, a lot of propaganda about, the victory. This was the victory gardens, right? The victory gardens and everybody growing their own food so that the food sources that were here were able to be shipped off to the troops. So the same time period, there were innovations of chemicals, such as DDT, that was really brought about for the troops. Because I know my father was one that came home from World War II with malaria, or had malaria and then came home, and just came home like a scarecrow. He was just so incredibly thin. So, and of course, this kind of got the ball rolling in terms of lots of innovations of chemicals. So this is when chemical fertilizers got their start. And of course, chemicals in food preservation, because they were trying to find how could they prepare food in such a way that they could ship it and get it overseas. So at this point, we had frozen vegetables and frozen juice and so on. So now what's happening today is there's kind of not necessarily a backlash, but on the positive side, the radical change that we're going through is in terms of the earth and how we relate to each other. So if we think about this, that there are so many chemicals in our food that it's, having damaging effects on our earth and also our health, that, there's a tremendous amount of green solutions that are coming up, using organics, technological advances with AI and digital IDs. I think it was in Norway or Sweden, I was reading about the fact that they have chips now that people can have all of their health data embedded in a chip that they carry around with them all the time. And then, it's readily accessible. We have sustainable and food production that's happening incredibly right now, hydroponics and all sorts of ways to figure out how we can feed all the increasing population that we have in the world today, as well as alternatives to toxic ingredients. So Barbara, this is the area when you were sharing with me earlier about your revelation about food. I was immediately came to this part of the talk. I was like, "Ooh, this is kind of interesting here." So we'll see where this goes. Another positive outcome is I think people are really, there's more and more people who are connecting with the fact that animals are not just beasts of burden, but actually animals are sentient beings. And we're finding more and more people choosing vegetarian and vegan paths. It's not necessarily, the approach for everyone, but there's also an evolution in food, right? Science is getting very keen on trying to make things that are, plant-based, but yet still have the flavor and the texture that people like. We've come a long way from Yule Gibbons and grape nuts. So it's very interesting to see all of these things are happening. So we have a couple of more years of Uranus and Taurus. And now on the challenging side of Uranus and Taurus, this speaks to environmental instability. And of course, we're seeing superstorms, incredible floods like last week. I think has just wrapped up, I hope, for California, just the incredible floods that have just broken all sorts of records. I think it was in Santa Cruz, California. Last weekend, I was reading that there was in one day like 10 inches of rain. And I can remember not that many years ago that getting like 4 inches of rain in one single day was just a tremendous amount of rain. So this is just really unprecedented. We've had incredible hurricanes and tornadoes, and it used to be they were kind of one-off, but boy, they just have seemed to really taken on a life of their own. And of course, now we have this glacial ice melt happening, rising tides. And then during COVID, we had food and supply chain issues. So Uranus and Taurus can definitely have unexpected shifts that can affect the earth. So, but I think it's definitely a wake-up call in terms of how we are stewards to our planet and what kind of changes that we need to make. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about Neptune and Pisces has another year. It's been in, Neptune has been traveling through Pisces since 2012. And we're not going to really talk about the global implications of this, but more on just a personal side, right? This is a time of heightened intuition and heightened creativity. This is a time period when we can explore spirituality. Now, whether that's spirituality or religion, it kind of falls under the same umbrella, because it really is about trying to connect with source, whatever that source is. This is about pondering life's big questions, as well as a spiritual quest or an awakening. And in terms of creativity, this is a fabulous time for creativity. There's visionary insights and innovation, not just within the arts, but also if you think about innovation, right? It's about taking the vision of something that doesn't exist and being visionary, right? And seeing something and then bringing it into today. And then, of course, on the unhealthy or negative sign of Neptune and Pisces, because it's the yin and the yang, is that with Neptune and Pisces, if it is not manifesting in a healthy way, there's a tendency to fantasize. So too much Neptune can lead to fogginess, or confusion or illusion, or delusion, right? You can fool yourself if there's a heavy Neptune influence. Thus the picture of the caterpillar smoking the hookah pipe. And then it's a time when you can get lost. So while it has some really plus sides, it's always good to kind of be on the lookout for those. And we've been in this kind of zone for a while, so just another year or so. Now we're going to come down and bring it down a little bit more towards some faster moving planets, the personal planets, and really think about how this impacts us on a personal level. So we just finished Mercury being retrograde. Now I want to talk about this for a minute because I know not many of you that are listening right now are really interested in social media, but Mercury is or was mythologically the messenger of the gods, and Mercury rules communication. So this can be, speech, it can be written messages, emails. It also applies to contracts, anything that sort of you commit to in writing, right? Or verbally. So when Mercury is retrograde, it's actually a time to slow down and just not move so fast and review things. So it's about a time period to hit the pause button and reflect, certainly before speaking and then connecting with your inner wisdom. So it just moved direct yesterday, or it's stations, and then it moves direct. And this happens 3 times a year. Often will people say, oh, don't do anything with technology because, technology can fail during a Mercury retrograde. I think some of these things are overstated. But to be perfectly honest, I did kind of pause and want to do this talk after the Mercury went direct. So there's a reason I chose it for today. Just hedging my bets. Why not? But it's something that people are beginning to talk about quite a bit, but it does happen pretty frequently. So life moves on. But if you have the option to maybe wait and take extra time to have those deep conversations or to sign a contract, just take a moment and make sure you're being extra diligent because it's a little bit easier for mistakes to happen. Now, Saturn is moving into Pisces, and this will happen in March and it will last until May of 2025. And what this means is Saturn is the planet that is about reality. It's about structure. It's about responsibility, manifestation. It's kind of the big brother, if you will, right? It's the taskmaster. It's going to make you kind of hold your feet to the fire and work really hard. And Pisces is very nebulous, right? And how I see this is where your dreams have the chance of coming out of the dream world and getting real. This is weaving spirituality into your daily routines. So maybe if you haven't really been able to ground that spiritual practice, whether it's a yoga practice or meditation, or if you do breath work, any of those spiritual modalities, like this is a time that you can really ground them in reality, right? So mysticism and fantasy get a dose of reality. And I think this is a great opportunity to go ahead and just get real. take those dreams and get real with them. I think this one's really exciting. Now, I couldn't help but kind of go on a little bit of a tangent, because another way of looking at Saturn in Pisces is Saturn is also the planet of maturity, right? And responsibility. And Pisces is a water sign. So I went back and did some research, and this is really interesting. The last time Saturn was in Pisces was in the early 90s. And lo and behold, there was this organization that was developed, and they decided to have a World Water Day. The first one was March 22nd, 1993. Now, they were trying to, and still are, trying to call attention and awareness to freshwater sustainability around the globe. So there were, as you can see, I did some pulling of some numbers, and the water scarce countries in 1955, there were 3. In 1990, there were 13. And then by 2025, the UN is predicting there will be 23 water scarce countries. So this is just something that we can think about in terms of water, right? How can we be responsible with the use of our water? And I watched a big documentary person, and I watched a documentary not too long ago in one of the Norwegian countries. I have forgotten which one. Actually, many of the homes put gray water in to their toilets instead of fresh water. Which it never even occurred to me that we are flushing fresh, drinkable water down our toilets. And, short of changing our water system completely in our country, that was just an interesting thought that I had about freshwater sustainability, is how could things be different? And then, of course, this is a Lakota phrase meaning water is life. And I was reading that you can live without food for quite a while, but we can't live without water. And of course, you know that we are made of mostly water. I've read various percentages, but our body is a tremendous amount of water. And of course, Leonardo da Vinci is purported to say that water is the driving force of all nature. And another quote is, "In one drop of water are found all of the secrets of all of the oceans." But I wanted to just take a pause because I feel like this is pretty important. Again, especially being a metaphysical group. And I found some research on consciousness and water. So again, structure is Saturn, water is Pisces. So Saturn is moving into Pisces. And I have, oh boy, it's all fuzzy. The Hidden Messages of Water. I should have done a screenshot of this, by Dr. Emoto, which came out, I believe, in the 90s. The Hidden Messages in Water. And he did research where he was having messages for water. So he would do something written, and it would be a positive word or phrase. And then he would take the water and he would freeze it. And it was remarkable in terms of the structure of the water, these beautiful, almost, crystalline structures versus the ones that were subjected to negative phrases and so on. So we're just horrific. And you visually just compare the two, and it was very, very dramatic. And I know many of you are familiar with his work. Well, there's a gal by the name of Veda Austin, and she has written a book called The Secret Intelligence of Water. And again, another astrologer pointed me to her work, and it's pretty amazing. And then there's another one I'll talk about. So this gal, she has been doing similar research, kind of jumping off of Dr. Emoto's work. And you can see in the Petri dish, she has written a number 4 up here at the top. And then she puts water in and she freezes it. And then of course, this is the result under a microscope, is that the water is actually mimicking what the image is. So she has done even more research. This was kind of, I think, some of her early work. And then this is actually, I pulled this off of her Facebook page. This is different human and anatomy from human beings. And this is what her caption is, this is water's comprehension of human anatomy and hair revealed in ice. So she has, done a lot of work. She's gone from, drawing pictures and then having her hand under a Petri dish, and which is what this one was, where she had put her hand under it and then froze the water, and it's mimicking the image that water is being exposed to. And then these other ones are just some of the research that she's doing now. Is she's actually asking questions of the water, and she is asking, what do you know about this? Maybe it's a pyramid and it will have a structure that looks like a pyramid. So she's really come to really understand that there is this intelligence in water. And then the last one I wanted to talk about is this Dr. Carly Newday, and this is very cool work. She's doing research surrounding vortexes with water. So it's stimulating the water with the vortex motion that is invigorating the water in such a way that when it's being pushed through pipes in this vortex and going out into fields, that it's actually impacting the quality of the crop that's being produced, how fast the seeds are germinating, how, the output. So she's been working with some organic farmers, and some incredible work is coming out of this. And so I think it's really interesting to follow. It's kind of like once you've been introduced to some of these concepts, you're just, hopefully they will come across your desk or your feed on your news, or you can just become a little bit more aware of what is happening with our perception and what we think about not only the earth, but water in itself. So this is all really exciting, very exciting revelations. All right, and we're going to bring it home. So we have just a few more to talk about. Right now, we have, hold on, I have to move my little screen so I can see. We have Jupiter in Aries until May of this year. So this has been, Jupiter has been in Aries for a little while, and this is about big ambitions, right? Aries is the planet, is the sign of kind of it's action, taking action. And when Jupiter moves into Aries, this is about big ambitions. It takes the sign and it expands it. It has optimism and enthusiasm. So if you have a project that you are wanting to start and just haven't, this is the time. Get it going, get it started. So that's why I wrote, bring it and do it, because this is going to be a great time to kind of kick things off, which feels really good considering where we were just a couple of years ago. And then we have Jupiter is then moving into Taurus. So it will leave Aries and move into Taurus. And this is a little bit more security minded. Again, Jupiter expands, but Taurus is really about comfort and security. So again, it's going to make you want to kind of get that big fuzzy blanket even more. It is about using our resources, but Taurus is so security minded. It wants to be very safe and very practical. It is willing to do things, but it wants to make sure it's going to have a payoff that will result in its security. So there will be abundance, potentially, but it's going to be protective about those things. So when I think of Jupiter and Taurus, because Taurus also can rule food and it's about physical comfort, that I would really watch that tendency to overindulge, whether it's food or alcohol or whatever. But if it's the old adage that if it tastes good, then have an extra serving or an extra glass, and that may not be the wisest, but that's a little bit of what Taurus, Jupiter and Taurus is about. So the last couple of ones I want to talk about are the North Node and the South Node of the Moon. They're an 18-month cycle and they rotate through. So this gives us an opportunity to really look at our soul purpose, the gifts that we bring into this world. And so North Node has been in Taurus since about a year ago, and it has another 6 months or so. This is a heart space, right? This is integrating material sustainability with spirituality. And right now we're seeing that it's currently out of balance or has been out of balance, materialism and greed. But this is a time for those lessons and integrate what we can, make headway, make growth, and then we'll move on to the next one and we'll circle back around in a while. And we are moving into North Node in Aries and South Node in Libra. And starting in, I have the dates on here wrong. So it's starting in 2023, and then it's moving on for 18 months. I didn't notice that. But this is about integrating your needs with others. So whether that's your partner, whether it's a business partner, or again, it's an important person, and most often we think of it as our life partner. So this can also result in division and selfishness, but it's about finding the balance, about cooperation and collaboration. This is looking at balancing your needs with your partners, or what I call the I versus the we. So just a quick recap, 2023, it's an in-between year between chaos and new beginnings. We are moving away from, and this is going to take a while, nothing happened overnight, but I think we're moving away from top-down structures into more equitable, community-oriented humanitarian model. This will not happen overnight. This will take years, but I promise you, if you look back on this time period in the next 5 or so years, you're going to see changes. Technology advances will take off in these areas: AI, quantum computing, robotics, green energy, and so on. We're also at a time period of emotion or environmental instability, but also stability. So it's the two, right? Green movements, moving away from chemicals, return to earth, more holistic, plant-based, will just continue to increase. We have a time period of heightened intuition and compassion and creativity. It's a potential, I think this is huge, for dreaming of new beginnings, right? So this is where a lot of these innovative ideas come from, whether they come into fruition in the real world or whether it's just for your personal at home or within your family. It's a time to take action and move forward for the next few months. Then this is going to be truly a year about seeking comfort and security. Like, we've had a pretty crazy couple of years, and I think we're all honing in on the fact that we really need to take care of ourselves and our body, right? This is balancing also spirit with matter in the first half of this year, and then the second half of the year, this will be on focusing on relationships and moving more into that area of our lives to create more balance and harmony. So I just want to end with asking you, like, what is the season of your life. And in astrology, we know that whatever is above is also below, as you can see reflected in this picture here, which I just love. This reminds me so much of there was a researcher in the Pacific Northwest, I think up in Vancouver or on Vancouver Island, that was studying the network of the tree roots and how much communication is going on, not just within the tree itself, but to other trees and within the whole forest. There's this network of communication that's happening, both in sharing resources and nutrients, as well as just, announcing danger and so on. So it's pretty cool. So as above, so below. But as we move through the areas of our life, whether it's our finances, our intimate relationships, our career, or our spiritual or religious life, they all have a time when the spotlight is on them. I think this is the beauty of knowing about the astrological cycles, is that we're given a time period where these time periods happen to be illuminated, and they're time for us to take serious heed in terms of really trying to look closely at them and advance and grow spiritually and just within our own person. So we have challenges that may take us to the brink of despair, or we experience our gifts that can bring us our greatest joys. But no matter the season that you are in right now, just know that there is divine wisdom that's reflected in the stars. So thank you very much for being here, everybody. I super appreciate it. Now, just really quickly, if I can just do a quick plug, like I do astrological consulting, year ahead forecasts, as well as birth charts, which I call kind of your life path reading. I do consultations as well. So if you're, going through an issue and I've done your chart for you, that we can kind of talk through things. And I usually do that with your chart up. I do relationship readings. I'll be answering important questions. Like if you have one question you want answered, I'll start doing that in the spring. I do group readings. If you can do me a favor, if you could sign up for my newsletter, that would be fabulous. Like that's the one thing that would really help me. And if you do that, you will not miss out on special offers. You'll hear about some of the news events and things that I'm offering first, as well as updates on just news in general. And if you'd like, be on the lookout. I will send each one of you a focus for 2023. It's just a really quick sheet that has kind of the key dates and then just like a phrase on what to focus on. So I want to thank each of you. And if you're interested in going over to my website, you can scan that QR code to get there. And there's my pertinent information. So again, I just want to thank everyone for listening, and I appreciate it. Thanks so much. I'm going to stop.
Thank you.